Okay, so welcome to the meeting of the Fire Resilience and Emergency Planning Committee. The main item today is a discussion on emergency services collaboration in London. Members of the public may like to follow us at London Assembly on Twitter and use the hashtag AssemblyFire and collaboration for this meeting. Could I ask everyone please to check that their electronic devices are switched to silent mode to avoid any interruptions. Can I ask our clerk today, please, Jonathan Baker, are there any apologies for absence?
Apologies have been received from Assembly Member Ashleimi.
Thank you. Can I ask members to note the list of officers on the report and ask if they have any additional interests to declare?
No, Chairman.
Thank you. Can we agree the minutes from our previous meeting held on the 31st of January 2019?
Agreed.
Thank you. Can I ask the committee to note the completed and outstanding actions? Okay, so this brings us to today's main item, the discussion with invited guests of the emergency services on collaboration in London. Can I welcome our guests to start with? So it's Kevin Canavan, Head of Collaboration, London Ambulance Services. Welcome.
Thank you.
DAC Matthew Twist, Transformation Director at Metropolitan Police Service.
Afternoon.
David Shek, and Regional Secretary, London Fire Brigade Union. Welcome.
Hello.
Susan Ellison-Bunce, Assistant Director, Strategy and Risk, LFB.
Afternoon.
Richard Mills, and congratulations, Richard, on your wonderful and new position. But in the meantime, I still have to call you the Assistant Commissioner, Operational Policy and Assurance, LFB.
Good afternoon, thank you.
And thank you so much to our guests from Durham. I'm sorry you had such a terrible journey here, but you're here and we're very grateful. So it's Councillor John Robinson, Chairman of Durham and Darlington Fire Authority and Emergency Services Collaboration Working Group, and Sarah Natras, Assistant Chief Fire Officer, Durham and Darlington Fire Authority.
Good afternoon.
So welcome all. Okay, so we're all going to ask various questions. We'll direct most of them to specific people, but if you want to say something else, then please just indicate. So I'll start off, and this is to all of you. So what does emergency services collaboration mean to you? So shall I start with Kevin?
So emergency service collaboration, we've always collaborated as the emergency services, predominantly on the operational, in the operational arena. All three services have been in existence for some time now, and collaboration has happened to a greater or lesser extent. The statutory duty introduced in 2017 was a timely reminder and prompted the services into formalising arrangements regarding collaboration. So since 2017, I think it's, as I say, the statutory duty has been a timely reminder. We've formalised arrangements, certainly here in London, and I know colleagues across the country have. And we've established a London Blue Light collaboration team that was set up at the behest of the three chiefs at that time to look into areas where collaboration may add value. And as per the statutory duty, seek out efficiency and effectiveness. So for me, those are the two watchwords that collaboration mean for the three services: efficiency and effectiveness.
Okay, thank you, Matthew.
Hello. I think for me it's about how we can work together to improve service to the public of London, principally. And there's lots of, yes, the statutory duty, again, as Kevin said, was helpful in terms of placing that at the forefront of our future thinking. But there's a lot, particularly in London, and particularly driven by events that we've seen in London over the last couple of decades, if not longer, has driven a lot of collaboration and joint working at an operational level, where in many areas I would say that we are sort of leading in the UK in terms of how we operationally can work together, driven by events principally. But for me, the collaboration looking forward, the work that's ongoing now, the work that we've been doing as part of the Blue Light Collaboration Group, as part of our joint collaborative contact and response project, is now around how we can take that further and how we can improve our services to the public.
Thank you, Dave.
Yeah, we have no problem working on incidents on the fire ground with the different services, but I do want to make clear we are opposed to any type of merging and turning out to shouts together. This is because we do believe the services should be kept separately, especially when turning out to shouts. For example, whilst we have a lot of respect for our colleagues, like the police, it is our belief that the services should be kept totally separate, where fire and rescue, they're law enforcement.
Okay, so you want it to be kept separately, despite...
Yeah, for turning out for shouts and stuff.
Perhaps
Backroom stuff, sharing buildings. Like we have got cases where we do share buildings where we're not seen as together turning out in shouts. We're less opposed to that. But in general, the services should be separate.
Okay, perhaps we'll explore that with you later, because some of us have got different views, so that would be interesting. Thank you. Susan.
I think I'd echo our colleagues in the other emergency services in London. It's primarily for us around improving outcomes for the public, improving public safety, and looking to improve our efficiency as well wherever we can. We do need to look at strategic alignments, and that's something that we're doing through the governance arrangements that Matt's already alluded to. But primarily, this is about improving the offer to the public.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Richard.
I'd fully concur with everything that's been said by our blue light colleagues and Susan in relation to providing the best possible service to the public through collaboration. So it's not only efficiency and effectiveness, it's how we operate both at the front of house and back of house, dare I say, in relation to improving the training and education, the contact that we have with a broad range of people, and the speed at which, through collaboration, we can provide a better service both in our prevention activities but also in our response. Let's not lose sight that the purpose of blue light collaboration is, the primary purpose is to save life, and everything that we do within collaboration, whether it's front of house or back of house, is all focused on giving the best for Londoners, taxpayer, and also those people that commute to London.
Music to my ears. Thank you. Councillor John Robertson.
Thank you. Clearly, in the county of Durham, we're a rural county. We had to look at collaboration long before the duty of collaboration came in. So it's ingrained into our philosophy, it's ingrained into why we use the title being the best. It's been the best in providing improved public safety. We looked at collaboration not only with our fellow colleagues in the police, the ambulance, etc. We also looked at, we have the Pennine Way runs through our area, so we have collaboration with Mountain Rescue. We have quad stations, we have tri-stations. So we've looked at all different agencies as well as the normal statutory. We've also looked at collaboration locally in regards to what the fire services in the North East can do to work together, both front of house and back. And we also heavily been involved, along with the London, in the national collaboration among all fire services. So we thought it looked at both internally as a fire service and externally with our agencies. And certainly we became a pilot site with the NHS in regards to first responding. So we took it as a global, we would join in with anyone.
Good. So,
yes, I exactly concur with all the Blue Light Partners comments for now. Definitely our drive is efficiency, effectiveness, and obviously our delivery to the public sector and the public safety in the community. Our strategy up in County Durham and Darlington based on three areas: better value for money, so make sure that we can look at quantifiable efficiencies in any collaboration that we do. Improving our outcomes, that improves the service we provide to local people and local communities, and also looking to reduce the demand that we have by working together on our individual organisations and hopefully improving our delivery to the local community. But it's absolutely vital that this is bought in by all partners and driven from the top of the organisation throughout.
okay, lovely. So if I concentrate on Durham to start with, I mean, has the Policing and Crime Act's duty to collaborate made much difference, or were you doing it before then anyway?
We were doing it before then. We have a collaboration board that the PCC attends. I attend, excuse me, beg your pardon. I attend as chair of the Fire Authority. The Chief Constable attends, the Chief Fire Officer attends, and senior officers, and we meet on a regular basis, examining and looking at collaboration and how we can take it forward. So it's something we established before the Act. So it was just rolling on.
So it's continuing. has it changed, if I can ask everybody else, has this Policing and Crime Act changed the way the emergency services work in London? Has it, were you doing any of it first, Richard?
So I think in relation to something my colleague said earlier, in relation to the operational response, members may recall that we did a collaboration day back in November 2017, where we demonstrated at Lambeth Fire Station the blue light collaboration that was already taking place. In answer to your question around the Police and Crime Act, it's an enabling act that will enable us to formalise the conversations and think about corresponding, think about collaboration in relation to all the activities we take, whether that is operational, whether that's through our support services. So many of those conversations have been taking place even before the Act. What that Act allows us to do is to bring it onto the forefront of all our thoughts when we're in the early stages of talking about our strategies, and also when we talk about our contracts and efficiency and effectiveness as a whole, as a holistic approach.
Okay, has anybody got anything to add to that? No, before I go on, Andrew.
Yeah, well, thank you. I mean, I think it's just following on from what Richard's just been saying. I mean, you're all doing it anyway, so why do you need a statutory duty to make you do it? Is question one. And question two, have you actually had the resources you need to do it properly? And in particular, for example, Richard, I'm thinking of the USAR exercise, which we had in February, where you were there and the police were there, and it was a very good opportunity, but LAS couldn't afford to go, as my understanding. So without the resources, is this really going to work effectively? I don't know, Richard and Kevin and Matthew.
I wasn't aware that the LAS couldn't afford to go to that particular
Well, that was my
event. I think
impression.
it
If there was
was
another reason.
operational pressures was probably more likely. As you say, has the Act actually changed anything that we do? As I say, it has formalised the collaboration arrangements. All three services have invested heavily in collaboration in terms of structurally. We've created a London Blue Light collaboration team. We've created governance structures around this, and we've formalised and embedded collaboration into the three organisations.
I think it's also the legislation itself. Whilst we were doing much of the stuff anyway, what it has done is given more momentum. It's given more of a push, and it's sort of given extra focus. So our three chiefs meet now more regularly to formally discuss collaboration. We meet at this sort of level to discuss how we're taking forward the sort of thematic areas that we're looking at in terms of collaboration. The exercising and and I think it is true to say the exercising and operations has been well established in London over many years. I can think back to significant exercises that we've done over the past decades. But that isn't without challenge, again, and there are reasons why, for whatever reason, at whatever time, individual agency, individual sort of services may not be able to support, as Kevin has outlined. But generally speaking, we've got a good track record of delivering fairly large multi-agency exercises, and do across a variety of spheres, whether that's sort of terrorist-related incidents, whether that's, as you said, USAR type stuff, whether that's CBRN, whether that's mass casualties, all that sort of stuff is well exercised and has been over the course of the years in various operational contexts within London.
Just to
Well, I'll come to you in a minute, Susan. I've got another question for you in a minute. Richard?
From my perspective, in relation to your question, it's not always necessarily about monetary value. It's about the amount of time and investment. So we will utilise each other's skills. And I know I've spoken to Kevin. We have one of LAS members of staff that sit with us to help us with our medical intervention activities, and it's proven invaluable. So whilst the question around collaboration is, can it be funded, there will always be challenges around exercising. There will always be the challenges around resourcing for all services. The benefit of doing collaboration is about freeing up spare capacity by utilising people more effectively and utilising some of that capacity for other activities for the benefit of the blue light services in our response, and also in relation to how we operate during our prevention activities. So I think the Enabling Act and the fact that we have got a collaboration group established is evident from us as an organisation of the benefits that will bring long term.
So that brings me to the question, I think that neatly comes to the question I was going to ask Susan, which is what resources are we actually putting in as the Fire Brigade and indeed the other two emergency services into this? How many bodies are actually working on it? And are we going to get value for money out of it? In other words, how are we going to measure the outcomes to make sure that the outcome matches the input?
Sure. In terms of the investment, in governance terms, I meet regularly with Kevin and Matt, and we are coordinating and driving, if you like, that blue light collaboration. So that's part of the investment. That's part of my time. We have funded, London Fire Brigade have funded 2 half posts to put together into the team. That is also partly funded by the LAS and the Met. So we have just 2 whole-time people really working on coordinating and driving it. So they're not actually running projects that will deliver collaboration. What they're doing is they're making sure that all the services are aware of what is going on, identifying opportunities to collaborate, which is part of our duty under the Act, of course, now, is not just to be collaborating where we can, but to actively seek opportunity to do that. And then we are working to support colleagues like Richard and his equivalents in the other emergency services so that they can meet regularly and pick up the thematic areas in the strategic intent. So the idea is that with good strategic alignment, we're focusing on opportunities that we were all interested in developing anyway, and then working to do things in concert so that we can do what we were intending to do anyway, but better together, hopefully more cheaply. In terms of measuring actual outcome and value for money, I think you're right. I think it is quite hard to measure that as an outcome. Fundamentally, what we'd hope is that our performance indicators in London, the number of fires, the number of fatalities, those sorts of performance indicators, the performance indicators by which we measure our performance already, are sufficient to measure the effectiveness of the activity that we're carrying out with partners. I'm not sure that it warrants
so those statistics you expect to improve as a result of this?
Yes. It would be very hard to identify what proportion of that benefit was accrued from collaboration activity, but fundamentally, if we believe that we're measuring our performance in the areas that matter, we would hope that collaborative activity will improve that performance. We could look at input kind of performance measures. We are certainly collating the data on collaboration, and we're in a position to identify what's working and what's not working so well. Evaluation of specific initiatives is underway, so we're looking at the safe and well visits that we've been piloting in 5 boroughs across London, and we're doing evaluation of that. That will give us specific information about the effectiveness of that particular initiative. But I think it would be very difficult to say, as a result of collaboration A, we have delivered this outcome for London. I think it would be very difficult to pull that apart that specifically.
Okay, and going back to the start of your answer, across the 3 emergency services, we've got 2 bodies, as it were, working on this. Just 2 bodies, right? Okay. And finally on this, question to our colleagues from Durham. To an extent, I suspect you've been doing this because you're a relatively small brigade. I think that the population of your area is the same as my constituency.
600,000.
Yeah, well, that's about the same as my constituency of 2 London boroughs. If you're looking at collaboration, isn't there a case in some of the smaller brigades to actually merge those brigades with neighbouring brigades to get a better critical mass and reduce overheads and costs that way?
Can I come back to that, but also give you a national perspective on earlier on? With the Emergency Service Working Group, the 7 component constituencies, that's the police, ambulance, etc., we've set up 3 task groups, and them task groups are reporting directly to the Minister, and the task groups are looking at inspection and duty to collaborate. And what we're looking at is when the inspection are coming into both the fire and the police, and when they're coming into health, the CQC and the fire inspections looking at the effectiveness of the duty to collaborate and asking for responses back. Task Group 2 is looking at the financial barriers to collaboration, looking at what are the barriers, what are the problems, and at the same time we're looking at what have been the financial benefits from collaboration. And that is reporting back. And thirdly is looking at cultural issues. Are there any cultural barriers to collaboration? And also bringing in and looking at data. And certainly the current data is showing out of 358 responses from fire services to questionnaires, we actually have 805 instances where positive collaboration has brought efficiency and effectiveness across the country. Moving back to yourself, we are looking in Northumberland, Durham, Northumberland, Durham and Tyne and Wear are looking at where can we work together, can we combine our control, can we combine our operations. So we are looking at more collaboration working that way while still retaining the identity. And our local people want to retain their identity of their police and of their fire. And certainly our own Police and Crime Commissioner has made it quite specifically he does not want to take over fire, and he does not either want to be on our fire authority, because what he says is by being on the fire authority it could restrict his activity and restrict the way he carries out his police and crime commissioner role. But we believe our identity as a single fire authority is important.
Okay, thank you. Oh, did you want to...
It's just a sort of supplementary on the number of people, because Susan alluded to the 2 from the LFB that's on that team, but actually the total team is bigger.
That's what I was trying to get at.
Yeah, so we've got, in total it's 4.5 people, and it doesn't sound huge, but actually it's more than, so it's 4.5 people across the LAS, the Met and Fire. And that team is, and you touched on the question of benefits, sir, and that team is, at the moment, working with Essex Police, who are not Essex Fire and Rescue, sorry, get my agencies right, who are the national leads in terms of benefit mapping for collaboration to look at how that can be done. So that's one of the strands of work that the team's currently looking at.
Okay, thank you. Recently there's been a transfer, I suppose it's about a year ago now, of responsibility for London's Fire and Rescue Service from LFIPA to the Mayor. Do you think this has created new opportunities for more collaboration? And if so, can any of you give an example of that?
I'm not sure it has particularly, no. It's enabled a focus on it, and as colleagues have already said, we were collaborating before. The Police and Crime Act itself introduced a stronger focus on that and an emphasis on the need to take collaboration into account in particular ways. But what it did do, I think, was just prompt the 3 chiefs to come together, as they were anyway, but to look specifically at collaboration. And now the 3 chiefs that we have, the 3 previous chiefs agreed a strategic intent. The 3 current chiefs have agreed a revised version of that. And that's setting out their shared vision for collaboration at a very high level for the foreseeable future. So I think it's enabled us to focus on specific areas that are of interest to us across the 3 blue light organisations.
Okay. What governance structures are in place to ensure that there's effective oversight of collaboration activities in London?
So, go on.
Yes, no.
Oh, happy to start. I mean, I think there's a sort of hierarchy of meetings and structures that we have, and Susan's already articulated about the 3 chiefs meetings, which sets the vision and where we all report to and update. We've got the Blue Light Collaboration Board that sits below that, and beneath that the heads of project boards, and our collaboration effort and work has been separated into 6 broad strands, looking at strategy, response, prevention, people, command and control services, and business support / infrastructure, and I think within that one would include estates. So each of those heads of project boards has a working group. Internally within the Meta, probably of less interest, we've got the Blue Light Collaboration Board, where the leads, because again, whilst we touched on 4.5 people, there's far more than that working on collaboration, just not full time. So we've got senior people, directors within HR, within estates, within digital policing, the operation, who meet regularly at a senior level to take forward their area of responsibility and the area of work they're looking at. So in very broad terms, that's how I see it. I'm sure there's a better way of describing it.
Not at all, I think. I think that covers the highlights. We have a procurement working group, an IT working group. There are a number of areas that are looking at collaboration, but in effect as part of their day job.
And just to clarify that, you know, we advocate as a collaborative board that, you know, collaboration shouldn't be seen as an additional to do. It's part of your day job, and that's very much the emphasis placed upon the organisations, that collaboration is a vehicle that can help you deliver rather than an additional and burdensome task that it certainly isn't.
No, thank you. John, if I can ask you, in late 17, the Emergency Services Collaboration Working Group set out to establish an emergency services collaboration database. So can you provide an update on that work?
Yes, I partly referred to it. That database, 358 survey results came back from the country. 800 and, I did quote it earlier, 805 examples came out of that, and a report, and I've brought you a copy.
Lovely,
if you haven't got it. I have to give one caveat. Knowing that we were coming to London, you'll find pink is highlighted everywhere. So we've already highlighted for you from what London is, and you'll find there's quite a lot. So we produced a report on what the results came back. We're now then disseminating every single part of that throughout the various task and finish groups, and then that will then form the basis of the work of the 3 task groups over the coming year.
Lovely, thank you.
But can I just say, you talk about London, if you look in our report, and I was looking at it, the information sharing, and certainly there is a big paragraph, London features heavily on how good it is in information sharing, how it is being seen across the country. It's a beacon for its information sharing, for the way you've responded to the concepts of protect, prepare, contest. So in fact, we are watching London and working our systems based upon what you are doing in London. So I think every credit to London for that.
Well, that's what we like to hear, because we all think London's the best, so thank you very much. Okay, I'll hand over to Gareth now for the next questions.
Yes, thank you. Councillor Robinson, they'll be aimed at you mostly, and you're obviously a man who knows how to flatter his audience, so thank you very much. For
No. I'm just...
It might be justifiable flattery, but it's all good. As the chairman said, we do like to hear that good things about the London Fire Brigade. So all of you talked about why collaboration is a good thing in principle, and talked about how it might lead to lower cost and better output. Perhaps from your report, which I gather you're going to circulate after the meeting, could you give us an example of how that has worked in Durham? Because obviously you're slightly ahead of us in terms of what you've actually implemented.
I can give you 3 quick examples. We have a quad station in Barnard Castle. The quad station is where we have the police, the fire, the ambulance, and also our mountain rescue, all based in one station. So therefore we can respond instantly into the Pennine Way. We have a 3 quad station in the city of Durham, which is the fire, ambulance and ourselves, and there's also part of that for mountain rescue to go out. Again, all 3 of us based in one area, the efficiencies of only having one station, one base in the area. The public like it because they know if they want to go to the police, if they want to go to the fire, they go to the ambulance, they go there. We took part in I call it the first responder trial. This is the responder trial where we went out working with NIAS. We saved more lives in that responder trial than we did in our normal basic work of fire road accidents. That trial was a success. So there's 3 quick successes where we believe that prove that it does work.
Okay. In your the process of setting it up and then carrying it through, what's been the greatest challenge to establishing collaboration as a way of working up in Durham?
Change in personnel. We've had a change in the chair of the fire authority, we've changed there. We've had change in regards to the chief constable's about to go. We've had change, we lost our chief exec. So it's a change in senior personnel and maintaining that culture and that commitment. But that has been able to happen. But it's that. And it's also getting people to accept that the culture change, accept the collaboration. Doesn't mean to say we are going to take over, you're going to lose your service, you're going to lose your identity. The collaboration means working together, not taking over.
How have you managed to, because you said that in a very concise statement in here, but how have you made that real Have you made that real for people up in your neck of the woods? Because change is uncomfortable for everyone, isn't it?
Yes.
And certainly in London we have blue light services that have tried to cooperate to a greater or lesser degree over the years. And we heard from our Fire Brigade Union representative earlier on that there are some reservations the FBU have about certain things. I'm imagining you've encountered some of these problems already up in your neck of the woods. So have you actually demonstrated that collaboration would work, and it's not about taking services away or merging them or anything like that?
Can I pass over to Sarah, because that's Sarah's day-to-day work?
Exactly the point, I think, going back to what John said before, it's culture can be a big barrier. Everybody, different organisations and different outcomes that they're trying to achieve at the time, but as I said initially, it was like driving it from the top of the organisation, that belief. You develop those relationships early on by working together, get to know each other, understanding that it is the right thing to do. We are in austere times, we need to look at things differently and change. We can't carry on doing things like we used to do. We just haven't got the money or the personnel anymore to be able to do that, so we have to be innovative. We have to look at alternative ways to deliver our outcomes, and ultimately we're here to serve the public, so we need to change and adapt and move with the times and do things differently.
Okay. Turning to our London witnesses, from left to right as I look, so starting with Kevin, what do you see as the biggest challenges in London to taking forward the collaboration in the way that Durham have?
So one of the first things we did when we were established as a blue light collaboration team was went on a whistle-stop tour of the country, and we visited the station you refer to as a quad station, and saw some good examples, particularly in Manchester, around safe and well visits. So we went in and saw best practice in action, which was interesting and a steep learning curve. So, but to answer your question, what are the challenges around collaboration in London? As ever, personalities can get in the way sometimes. If people feel that their department is under threat, when you start talking about potential efficiency and effectiveness around back office functions, that obviously sets alarm bells ringing for some people. So the barriers can come up there. So I think it's about, for me, collaboration is about relationship building. 80% of collaboration is about being honest with each other, building relationships across the three services, and trusting each other. That this is not an exercise in cutting jobs. This is not purely an exercise in financial saving. This is, as Matt alluded to earlier, an exercise in improving the service and provision to Londoners. So I think once we can get over those cultural barriers of three well-established and long in the two services, and we've always worked this way in our own little silos, get over those cultural barriers, get over those personalities, and entrench collaboration as the way we do things around here, then that's the way forward. But our barriers haven't been many, if I'm honest. Some of the conversations we facilitated, you see a lot of light bulbs come on. For example, the three directors of estates met, and they were having a tea and biscuit chat around the issues they face. And one of them said, well, we've got a challenge in, I can't remember the area of London, and the other estate director said, well, that's funny, we've got an estate challenge there. And the third director said, I can't believe it, we've got exactly the same problems in that area. So for me, the challenges are getting people around the table talking, being honest and open with each other, and leaving nothing behind, and let's have those honest discussions.
Okay. Matthew?
So support everything Kevin said. I think the challenge is, I would say, culture, scale, investment, and almost legacy in some ways. I think the culture point is right in that if we all look to what the public outcome is rather than what the service outcome is, then that would be a good guide, and we're trying to do that. Do our performance matrix do what we're held to account over, drive collaboration, or do they drive individual service targets, is a question. I'm not saying that's a big blocker, and the sort of ways of working that we have, which are long steeped in history and difficult to change. And we shouldn't underestimate that. I think scale is in having worked in a smaller force, where some of what John and Sarah has described is thrust upon you and you have to move more quickly, there are also other opportunities that you have there that are much harder to achieve in London. So in terms of scale, delivering change in a much larger organisation is slightly more difficult when you don't have the same day-to-day contact with all of the staff as you can achieve in a smaller county force where I've been before. And also some of the history, some of the just the geography of London. So again, I've seen it where we've developed in elsewhere joint accommodation. That requires significant investment. It requires new build sites effectively, or significant refurbishment of existing sites. And London is constrained in property terms in many ways. There aren't those opportunities to build significant new joint estates. However, there are absolutely places where we can collaborate, and there's things that we're looking at on the horizon, and there's things that actually informed by the duty to collaborate around. In West London we might have an opportunity where we could do something like that as a result of other things that are going on. And certainly in terms of our estates, there, as we are all looking to shrink our estate, or certainly the police are, from the number of buildings we had to the number of buildings we need to have to deliver an economic and effective model, we will look at how we can do that in collaboration. If we're building a significant new building anywhere, we will look at the collaborative opportunities within it. But to summarise the question, I think culture is a big thing. I think scale, and I think sort of how we're measured, how each of the services is measured, is something else.
David, from an FBU point of view.
I don't know if you know about it. Years ago, it was just going back to what I mentioned earlier. There was a bit of, like I said, we've got a lot of respect for our colleagues in the police and the ambulance. We work close with them all the time. But there was a situation years ago where the police were using a station in London, and the fire brigade were deemed to be associated with them, and attacks on firefighters went up in that area. We then subsequently started something called the Life Project, with my colleague Richard will know over there. So this is the type of stuff that we're worried about, that we're seen in a different light. So turning out shouts, and I get what my colleague Danny and they're saying about his quad station turning out. However, like I said, we're still very much opposed to it, because, no offence, but we're seen in a different light to the police. There's a lot more animosity towards our colleagues in the police, and that's the way we see it. We do share some buildings with the LAS, for example, Heathrow. We do have a shared building there, but like of anything, it's an individual circumstance where it's set up, so they don't impact on the fire station staff training and duties, and stuff like that can be looked at with the ambulance, but it's all on an individual basis.
So, because I heard what you said earlier on about not wanting joint shouts and things like that, and I understand that. You sounded at that time that you were more amenable to the idea of sharing facilities, but what you've just said now seems to contradict that. So you've said that you would be amenable to it with the LAS but not with the police, because you don't want institutional symmetry with them. You don't want to be brand associated, for want of a better phrase, with the Met. Is that correct?
No, not entirely, but yeah, there is that point where we don't want to be associated with the police, because of the way we're seen in a different light to the members of the public.
Okay. Moving on to the LFB then, I don't know whether Susan or Richard, which of you would want to say that, Richard?
So, to concur with my colleagues, culture is absolutely key. Culture and trust, as I see it. It's not only the culture and the understanding between the organisations, because obviously all of our cultures and some of our priorities, whether they are strategic priorities or whether our legislative priorities may differ, so it's about getting an understanding from each other about what that stands for. But it's also about the culture of the workforces and changing the way in which we communicate with our workforce around collaboration and what that means. All services are very comfortable on an instant ground collaborating to a greater end, and increasingly we're finding that the workforce is more and more focused on joint working through some of the softer areas with our emergency service colleagues. So a Safe and Well visit that's been running 5 boroughs has been piloted. It's a very good example of that. So we have worked with the LAS around slip, trips and falls. We are working with Metropolitan Police
around security of people's premises, bogus callers. So there are opportunities. If we do 84,000 home fire safety visits a year, there are opportunities to actually get into many properties that some other brigades, and I recognise some of the concerns from my FBU colleague, to get into premises and do some of that work, to do some of that prevention work on behalf of the LAS and the Metropolitan Police. So we are working very closely with them, and likewise, you know, we have a strategy of opening up fire stations and utilising those fire stations for our colleagues if we see fit. We will of course always listen to the concerns of the workforce and also from FBU colleagues, but I think it's very important to recognise that there is some significant benefits of working very closely together, training together, and that natural synergy that happens when you're actually in contact at a local level around how you interact on stations. We have London Ambulance Service come and join us. We have police borough wardens come and meet with borough commanders and stations. So it goes on. It's about how we are recognised, and we want to maintain our identity, but how we are recognised that actually we are supporting our colleagues from the other services to deliver better service for London. I think the other elements of challenge around collaboration is very much around capacity. So the example that was utilised from obviously a smaller police force that operated in, there are some significant figures where we want to, or the police would like us to get involved in. But as a fire service that is relatively small in comparison to LAS Metropolitan Police, it's about managing the understanding, the expectations of what we can actually deliver. So I think, in summary, it's culture, it's trust, and it's around what are our key priorities, our joint priorities, and what can feasibly be delivered within each capability or each organisation.
How far down the line are you on outlining those three key areas and discussing with colleagues in the other services, and how far are they in terms of reassuring their workforces?
Do you want to answer that?
I think it's probably true to say that we do that on a case-by-case basis, so on a project-by-project basis. So the communications around the work that Matt alluded to earlier that we've been doing together on collaborative contact and response, we've agreed joint communications across the three organisations with the staff in case they were concerned that we were looking at merging of roles or even necessarily automatically co-location and so on. So we agreed messages, and we made sure that we shared things at the right time in the same way to reassure staff that we were all working together. So that's an example of how we do it, and I think it's usually on a case-by-case basis.
I think a good example that was touched on is the collapse behind locked doors, the medical emergency behind locked doors, and we totally understand the primary duties of the respective agencies are different, but I think what the collaboration is looking to do is to make sure that the right service attends the job to deliver the best effect. So in terms of a case of collapse behind a locked door, is the best effect going to be achieved by a police officer coming and trying to kick the door down, or is it going to be achieved by a professional firefighting crew with a whole load of entry equipment that can do that in 30 seconds, if not less? Now the trial is, but we totally understand that can't be at the expense of being able to go and fight a fire if needed. So the work that's ongoing to look at the trial is to see, well, does that affect the demand? Does it mean that actually firefighters are less able to go and achieve the sort of core duties that they have to? Or actually, is that demand manageable? So we've got to trial some of this stuff to work out whether or not that demand is manageable across the services. But going back to all of our points at the very start, which I think we all thoroughly, wholeheartedly agree with, is about the delivery of the service to the public of London. And what they want at a time of crisis is somebody to help. And I think most people don't particularly care what uniform they're wearing if someone's coming to help them. Be that a medical emergency, be that a collapse, or actually be that a crime. I think what they want is someone in authority to come and provide some assistance, and it's just making sure that we maintain our core responsibilities, our core identities, and are able to deliver those whilst focusing on actually how we can provide that sort of help as needed.
Chairman, I think that's an excellent sentiment for me to finish on, so I'm going to stop there.
Okay, thank you, Andrew.
Yeah, can I just first of all broaden this out a little bit, because we're talking about blue light collaboration, but in practice isn't equally important the work that you have to collaborate with local authorities, social services, education services and so forth, and particularly if you're talking about the safe and well, or whatever it's called. That's as much to do with social services as it is with anybody else, isn't it? So you're doing that anyway. Do you need a statutory duty to make you do it?
If I can, if I may. So at a borough level, certainly if you look at borough commanders, you'll have many examples, both as LFIPA members and also as some of the scrutiny committees beforehand, that we have many links in to many organisations, not just local authorities. When you start talking about safeguarding issues, that goes across all of our three roles. The presentation around a duty to collaborate, I go back to what I was saying earlier about it's an enabling act. This has been going on for way before the implementation of legislation. So borough commanders, depending on their relationships with local authorities, depending on the key priorities of those local authorities as well as our priorities, will shape the way in which they engage with their public, will identify those particular people of vulnerability. It will also enable them to work with not only blue light services and local authorities but other agencies on a case-by-case basis for vulnerable people such as hoarders, and also some of the intelligence that's led in relation to some of the response or preventative work that we do. So whilst this Act may look at blue light services, the ethos of the London Fire Brigade, and not speaking on behalf of my colleagues but I'm sure it applies with them as well, is about that broader bit around how we collaborate with anybody that deals with the public that we can get into and be more effective in how we do that preventative work or how we do that response work. And whether that's us doing it or whether that's referring it to other agencies, that's the role that we expect from our firefighters when they go into incidents or when they do their community engagement activity.
Dave,
yeah, just on that, a couple of things they've touched on, obviously, like the safe and well-being stuff, is some of you may or may not know that it's part of a national negotiation going on, the National Joint Council for Firefighters, which isn't agreed, so it's agreed it's not part of our roadmap. We're actually currently, right now, as I'm sitting here, going through a consultative ballot about whether we deem an offer that's been put on the table as acceptable to do this type of work. We're recommending it's not acceptable, the amount of money they put up. So obviously, a lot of stuff they're talking about I wouldn't be engaging with because I wouldn't undermine our national negotiations on the NJC.
Okay. Can I come back to the issue of buildings and estates? I think Matthew was raising this. Isn't this idea of joint building, I mean, they've done it in Durham, but then presumably you built it specifically for that, possibly at a different time when money wasn't quite so tight. But in London, we've got one police station per borough. We may have 3 or 4 fire stations. We may have 1 or 2 ambulance stations. And you've all got different attendance time requirements. You've all got different operational requirements about where you should be to do X, Y or Z. Isn't it really pie in the sky to say, let's put you all together and to achieve your individual performance indicators and targets and goals?
Yeah, on that, Andrew, I'd agree with that because obviously there's different governance systems and different employers. It'd be near impossible.
So,
I think, well, I was going to say, I think it's on an opportunity by opportunity basis.
Yeah,
so, as you know, Heathrow, we all have a property and estate at Heathrow that may be affected by the proposals for the airport there, and there is potentially an opportunity for us to look at coming together and building a shared facility. That will be part of the consideration. Depending on our needs, it may or may not come to fruition, and depending on the cost of that, it may or may not come to fruition. But it's absolutely part of the consideration because there's the opportunity. As Matt was saying, because land is so unavailable in London, our opportunities are going to be fairly restricted. But when we get the opportunity, we'll certainly consider it.
And I think it doesn't have to be on the macro scale either. I think it's sort of, we have different response requirements and our sort of estates model lends themselves to that, but we also have requirements to have dedicated ward hubs or dedicated ward officers based within the communities. And what we do have is ambulance stations and fire stations that are also based in the community. So can we look at opportunities, and we have, where we've put small numbers of ward officers in those shared buildings for it doesn't sound overly ambitious, but actually it's certainly a start. Or if we are, as Susan's alluded to, we have got some major estates projects coming up in the next sort of 5 to 10 years. So where we do have those opportunities, and each of us will have them, is looking at the opportunity and looking at the duty to collaborate to say, if we are going to spend this amount of public money on developing a new site, should we do that together? Would it be more efficient? What's the benefit? What's the cost benefit analysis? Does it meet our operational needs? And effectively, whilst we can't sit here and say today that yes, we're definitely going to do that, what we're saying is that we'd look at each one on a case-by-case basis and very much look to, if there was an opportunity and it all aligned, we would definitely want to do it.
Sorry to interrupt you, Andrew. I think it's fair to say there are already several sites where we already co-locate. So Heathrow has been mentioned. The Fire Brigade headquarters hosts our ICT team. The Stratford Fire Station hosts our cycle response team. So there are numerous sites across London where either a buy service or tri-service presence is already there. But I think it's also important to point out that as one of the founding principles of collaboration amongst the 3 services in London is that the cost recovery should be, the costs associated with co-location should be on a cost recovery basis only. So no one service, and we all agreed to this, no one service should look to make financial gain out of the other, because it's very easy to say, yeah, move in, and we'll charge you commercial rent, and thank you very much. We've already tackled that thorny issue and said wherever we look to co-locate, it's on a cost recovery basis only.
I think it's important to recognise, as my colleagues have said, it's on the basis of does it give benefit to one or more agency. If it doesn't prove beneficial or it doesn't prove effective and efficient, then we would not be doing it. So if we want to co-locate because that of our response model fits our response model across whether that's 1, 2 or 3 services, then of course we would take the opportunity to look at it. If it doesn't suit the correct location for a fire appliance, we will not go down that route unless we can demonstrate tangible benefits. I think that the example that's been used by Kevin around headquarters, we have multiple agencies there. We have the LGA members there. We have LAS there. We have people that come and do hot deskings for fire aid. It's about what is the most efficient way, what is the best location to put people in. It's not purely about, as Kevin said, generating income or saving income. It's about being efficient and effective.
Yeah, I mean, I can certainly see a difference between office accommodation, for want of a better word, and operational stations, whichever one it is. And it seems to me trying to get the ducks in a row for an operational co-location is quite a challenge, let's put it like that. I mean, I know we've got one in Barnet with the fire brigade, one pump and one ambulance station, but they do seem, last time I went to, operate entirely independently of each other, although they're in the same, housed in the same building, which isn't really building a joint culture. So I don't know if Sarah or John want to come in. I mean, in your quad station, do the different service crews mix together, use the same gym or same canteen, or do they keep themselves?
No, they do integrate massively. It's developed relationships to no end, especially in getting to know each other before the bells go in and they turn out on those blue lights, and when we're most effective and respond to the people in need. So yes, it has the principles of JESIP, our interoperability with each other. It has absolutely improved that to no end. But they do integrate, they do share all of the facilities on station, they do share the costs of the station. So in terms of collaboration, opportunity to improve relationships, improve outcomes, reduce costs as well, it's satisfied all of those criteria in our collaboration strategy for that one premise alone.
We didn't know one opened in 2017 and the other 2018. We've also done a joint training facility with Durham Police because it came out of transformation funding and we may be different to to London, but our capital is now becoming extremely restrictive, and we are only able to look for funding in capital-wise in transformation. So the collaboration, transformation, working together is where we need to go for our capital. So certainly we have a joint training with the police centre in Durham, but it was built out of transformation funding, and we see that is going to be the way forward for the next whatever years, that we will have to work together collaboratively to put joint capital bids together to get the funding.
I suppose what this I'm getting at in the end is the cultural differences between the different services and indeed local authorities. I mean, each organisation has its own cultural differences. Is that always a bad thing, or that gets in the way, or is it something that has to be cherished and recognised?
I think we recognise it. I certainly recognise. I certainly recognise the need to have an individual identity, because obviously our roles are different on the instant ground, dare I say. However, I think there's also a need for the cultures to recognise and merge on certain areas, particularly when we're talking about interacting with members of the public around preventative work. You know, why could I not ask a firefighter to hand out a leaflet that's going to make a person safer? Whether that's through fire, whether that's through medical or health dietary advice, or whether that's through prevention of criminal activity. I'm not saying that the person that's presenting that leaflet is saying that they are a tri-service responder. What I am saying is there's a firefighter there that is more equipped and better rounded to give the information to the public. On the incident ground, everyone knows their role and knows their specific culture. But the one culture that does shine through on the incident ground is that we're all there to pull together in the same direction. I don't see why there's any different when we talk about preventative work. I do accept that there is a concern around image and perception, but I think part of that needs to be allayed. But at the same time, we need to recognise there are certain things the police will do that the fire brigade would feel uncomfortable being involved in, and vice versa. There are certain things that we may ask our other colleagues to do which they think actually that's not our core duty and we're not prepared to do that.
Okay. Thank you. Following on from that, David, I was very saddened by something you said a while back. In my view, and this is my view, the respect for all the blue light services isn't actually where it should be in some areas, as in by some. I was talking to a paramedic only a couple of weeks ago who says she's regularly spat at and hit at. I know firefighters suffer this as well. So I'm saddened to hear what you say about the relationship with police. Do you not feel that it is incumbent upon us all to lift up, if you like, in some areas, the opinion of the police? At the end of the day, you're all blue light services. You are all there to look after the public, and that's been demonstrated by comments from all of you all the time. And therefore, we should do everything we can, I think, to enhance the opinion of some of the police. And if that means by cohabiting as well, if that's all part and parcel of this big job, do you not think that it's incumbent upon us all to do what we can in that respect?
Firstly, I don't condone anyone having that bad feeling, but sadly, in society, we are viewed in different ways. Now, what I'm saying my concerns is that we're not seen in that way at the minute. We're a separate service. So what is by putting us in a link with law and enforcement, or another arm of the law, if you will, we could be seen in that light. So why would I put my members in that situation where they could be seen in that light and attacks on firefighters could go up again? I get what you're trying to say and what you're trying to get at, and like I said, there's no problem. We all work perfectly good on the fire ground. We've got good relationships. We've got a lot of good friends in the police force. However, the services are separate and they're seen in different lights, and there's nothing you can do about that.
Well, I think that's negative. I think we should be doing something about that, and I think it would help if the unions got behind that. We are all in this together. You are all the emergency services, and we are all very grateful for
the problem you've got, Susan, is the roles are very different. Sorry to interrupt you.
They are absolutely different, but nevertheless, you are all there as protectors of the public, and you all want to do your best. And I think protecting other services along the way is absolutely the way forward. Can I ask others?
I was just saying the roles are very different, and
should answer that.
Sadly, we can't get away from that. So that's where we are with it, and that
Okay,
is our position.
I hear what you say. I'm saying perhaps we
Well,
should try.
Well, I
Okay,
remember what happened
I'm
during,
gonna
during the
skip-
Brixton riots,
Yeah.
when the fire brigade got very badly attacked, when they were there to put out fires because they're behind the police lines.
Yeah.
You can't get away from the fact that there are differences.
But equally, I think we should be doing everything we can to assist our other Blue
I agree,
Lights
but
colleagues.
also, I totally agree. We will work closely. And
I'm
the fact of
loving
the
that
matter
you
is
agree with me, and on that point,
Yeah.
then I shall move swiftly on to the next.
my members' safety is paramount.
Excellent.
I think you agree with me.
I think he was agreeing with me, but thank you very much, David. Your
Safety has to be paramount.
Yes.
your question.
Some of mine has been
I know,
covered
Andrew,
already.
can cut across those.
So I'll move on to the
Thank
third
you.
section, I think. So thanks for all your answers already. We've got a very good understanding of where you do collaborate, and there's a lot going on already. We talked about the possible collaboration with estates and what you do there, and it going into the future about possibly what you do with sharing buildings. But I'd like to talk about IT. And that's another possible area where there's potential for collaboration. Is it a realistic aspiration for the emergency services to have integrated technology? So can I ask, starting with Kevin, what you think about that?
I don't know if you're aware of the GLA Collaboration Board chaired by the Mayor's Chief of Staff, David Bellamy. That board recently met, and the thematic areas that they're looking at are broadly similar to the Blue Light Collaboration Team areas. And so one of those areas was the ICT arena, and they looked specifically at the question you asked there around, surely, and I learnt very early on, when you ask ICT colleagues, surely you must be able to. It's never so simple. But in summary, when they looked, the three representatives from the services looked at the arena of ICT, their summary was, in technology terms, we see the power of the GLA IT community, and I include all three services in that, in our sharing of approach and continuing to enable the sharing of information between us and our user base. As we increasingly move forward towards cloud-based collaboration tools such as Box and Office 365, as well as desktop video, we are able to facilitate the sharing of information as we all adopt mobile working and install good quality Wi-Fi. The barriers to ad hoc co-location reduce, but the tools we have to make collaboration easier across sites become apparent. So what they're saying there is that there's over 1,000 different applications across the three services, and trying to amalgamate all of those with some of the security concerns that the MPS will have around access to data and the sensitive information that they deal with, coupled with patient sensitive data that we collate and the information that the fire brigade collate. It's an extremely complex environment, and it's never as simple as one size fits all. I think the ability for databases and software to talk to each other is probably more of the route we should go down, rather than actually buying one CAD system, because they're an extremely complex piece of equipment. And certainly there's been discussions long had around one CAD system for London, and they've proved futile in the past.
Okay,
but I don't say that there isn't opportunities that exist more around back office functionality and enabling more cloud-based activity, as the three IT experts from the three services and the GLA alluded to.
Okay, so there's some scope in the back office, but the majority of things will be, you need to do what you do for the ambulance service. So there's some things that can't be shared. Okay.
But the ability to talk to each other.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. Good, great. And Matthew, what do you say?
So I would agree. I think some of this was pulled out of the strategic outline casework that was done as part of the Police Transformation Fund, the sort of joint work we looked at in terms of contact collaboration. And do I think that the answer is that we all change onto the same command and control system? No, probably not. The reason is we're all at different stages in the life cycle of our different command and control systems. These are massively capital heavy systems to replace. And the Met is looking to replace its one now, but LAS and LFP are both at different stages in that. But should we get to a place where we can share information across the various command and control systems seamlessly and in real time, absolutely we should. So it's the integration that we're looking at. And one of the areas that we looked at as part of this strategic outline case was the development of the multi-agency information transfer hub, rather than just having a sort of point-to-point where every time you push a button it can update the LAS or the LFB, having a much more interactive system that is cloud-based, where actually you're continually updating each other. So the actual availability of information is that much quicker and doesn't rely on the manual process of pushing buttons to get things transferred back and forth. And I think there's an awful lot, this is exciting times in terms of technology for all of the blue light services. As we move away from the big desktop, the big hardware sort of purchases into more browser-based, into more cloud-based solutions. As we develop, I think over time, if there is the will, and I'm sure there is, our systems will become more closely aligned, not saying the same, but more aligned and more integrated. One of the big challenges Kevin's already touched on is data, and actually the patient medical records are hugely sensitive, just as our sort of crime intelligence records are hugely sensitive. But those are things that we can work hard on, and we can work hard to look at how we can share stuff. So I think there's a bright future with IT, but it's one for the long haul. Albeit the mate stuff, the mate hub stuff, we could develop more quickly.
Yes, Richard. Yeah.
So, Matt stole my thunder about the mate, so thank you very much for that. I'll go something else. From a perspective of sharing information and data, absolutely cloud-based technology is the way that we're looking to go. There are some tangible examples, even now, where we are sharing data. So, we introduced a new defibrillator, a manufacturer called Zoll, which came off a framework agreement in conjunction with the London Ambulance Service. So when we talk about tangible financial benefits, we're talking £200,000 saved on a framework agreement. That equipment will provide data that we can, through our joint network services lead, we can then provide that to the hospital. So once the fire appliance comes back to the station, that can automatically be downloaded, and that can be provided to the hospital services. So that is a tangible example of how we can share that data, and that is cloud-based kind of technology. The desire would be, of course, to do that transfer straight from a fire engine, straight, from the ambulance straight in. That is a direction of travel that we desire to go. Whether the technology can catch up with us, that's where we want to be. I think that the example of how we utilise and share data, not only data transfer, and if I use the same example, is that then shapes our education training of our fire crews in relation to the depth of compression, the frequency of compression. So we can then look at, in conjunction with the London Ambulance Service, okay, what have our firefighters done well, what can our firefighters benefit from, and how do we change our training? So we get quicker hands-on, we get more effective life-saving activity utilising the data that we've learned, and we provide that for clinical governance to the London Ambulance Service. So I think going forward, specifically in that area, I think there's some growth in the way in which we operate. But in support of both my colleagues, the data transfer at control centres, the emergency services network, radio network that's being developed, and the fact that all of us sit on that board in conjunction with the Home Office to make sure that the London desire and the need for London, around Transport for London, underground tunnels, etc., has a representation from every service, and how that then links in from a national perspective as well.
Thank you. David, have you got anything to add, or was that?
No, to be honest, they're going to be the experts in it. I just know that the IT systems do cause my colleagues here on the left quite a lot of headache by doing simple changes. That's all I know, really. But that's
Okay,
really
that's
an expert field.
Thank you. Right.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yes. As I mentioned earlier on, the point about working with local authorities as well. We talked about the fire safe and well visits. How is the information shared arising out of that?
So a lot of the community-based activities are driven by the Borough Commander. So as well as the fire safety and well visits where we're referring or providing information to other colleagues. We have a number of schemes already in place as well that we will, things like the life as an example, so we'll be doing knife crime. So we'd be speaking to our police colleagues to say, you know, what are the areas of knife crime in the area? Is that part of our prevention activity when we're educating young people? We have recently run a pilot, and I apologise, I think it's called Fire Safe, is it? Fire Safe, where they have gone into one borough, borough of Haringey, and run a pilot. Sorry, my apologies, it's called Safety First. And that's into secondary schools about combating knife crime and wider antisocial behaviour. Now, the police have actually done the police strategy team have actually done a feedback from the pupils, parents and the teachers around the behaviours once we've done that input in conjunction with Blue Light Services. So there are many pilots that take place, as Matt said earlier. We will always try and pilot something so we make sure that we're not overloading our commitment or promising too much. But there will always be some tangible benefits at local level. Now, that is primarily driven by the borough commanders and the relationships they have with chief execs and the borough commanders of police and their other partners. That then gets fed through in a wider piece of work to the organisation. So we would start to see some of the benefits around some of the interventions that we do, around antisocial behaviour, arson, for example. That's the whole primary, one of the reasons for the life course. But also our head of community safety, Chris O'Connor, will be looking at what does that mean for the strategy going forward. So I think it's well documented for many years about the community safety activities we do. It's just the added advantage of having our partners with us as well to deliver a more rounded message. Hopefully we see the tangible benefits and so will they. And it will be the conversations being had by borough commanders to say that's working well or it's not working well.
Thank you. Now, Dave, I want to come on to the corresponding pilots, and I know it's frozen in the dispute nationally. But what was the feeling of your members after the pilot ended? I mean, apart from the dispute, do you think it was a good thing to do or a bad thing to do? Because certainly, when I was talking to firefighters on the stations, I got a rather mixed picture.
Yeah, I think they weren't very happy with the trial. There's obviously aspects of it. I think in a general consensus, I'm speaking from a national point of view here, there's sympathy for some of the work. But obviously, I can't go into too much detail because I can't undermine the national negotiations. But obviously, it all comes down to pay, training. There was a lot of flaws found that would need to be addressed before we'd even look at it, stuff like that. But there isn't a big appetite in London for corresponding at all.
No, I mean, one of the issues I think was having to deal with distraught families while they're trying to...
Yeah, there was distraught family shouts that, in our opinion, they shouldn't have been sent on, which I won't go into details of, but there was quite a few issues with the trial. And
there were issues on training and equipment?
Yeah, training and equipment, inoculations, everything like that would have to be addressed 100% before we'd even consider it. And obviously, like I said, we're still in the middle of national negotiations, so...
Okay. And from the LAS point of view?
So from an LAS perspective, getting to the sickest patient quickest and administering a defibrillator has proven clinically over the years to produce good results, and the return of spontaneous circulation, ROSC, is one of the key measures in that. And clinically, getting ROSC, the best way to do that is by administering defib as quickly as possible. Now, whether that be delivered by an LAS member of staff, an MPS police officer, or a firefighter is, in my view, neither here nor there, or indeed a member of the public. So a personal example I'll use is my father lives 50 metres from Wimbledon Fire Station. There's 2 appliances there with 8 trained firefighters and 2 defibrillators on board. He collapsed 2 years ago. Unfortunately, at that stage, we weren't in the business of co-responding. So I'd ask the question as to why would none of those trained firefighters with their defibrillators not respond to a collapse that was 50 metres away. If someone knocked at a fire station door and said somebody's collapsed outside, I'm sure the firefighters would have no hesitation in responding to that patient. And I spent 10 years as a firefighter myself with Surrey Fire and Rescue. So I speak with a certain level of knowledge. And you know, preservation of life is a cornerstone of all three services. So that would be my challenge back to the FBU.
Before we put the challenge to the FBU, I understand from what I've been reading in the press that LAS is upping your game with different forms of response and so forth. More people on motorbikes and turning up to treat people on site rather than ferrying people up to ambulances, to hospital and so forth. Is that making a difference to your capacity to deal with these sort of things?
So our response model has changed nationally. We have now had the ambulance response programme, which has seen changes to certain category of calls into various different response outputs. As you know, the London Ambulance Service is one of the biggest and busiest ambulance services in the world, and capacity has always been a challenge for us. We are always looking at innovative ways to respond. However, I think co-responding is an additional tool that we shouldn't discard. I think it's one that we should invest in significantly.
So I think it's fair to say that from a Met perspective, we're sort of signed up to that in terms of carrying defibs on our cars, being deployed to cardiac arrest incidents by the LAS if we've got the closest unit to deal. And I remember some of this discussion, I don't know, 10 plus years ago, if not more, around should at the time armed response vehicles.
So before you go on, could I just ask in practice how it works? I mean, the way the corresponding with the brigade was working was that they were actually mobilised directly or indirectly by the LAS. If a police, was the same arrangement for the police, or if you came across somebody, you did it, or were you mobilised?
No, we can be notified. So we'd be notified in the same way. So if there is that incident, then we would attend. And often at times the police happen to be attending anyway, because often people dial the police or they dial the ambulance at the same time. But we would be notified by the LAS, and we'll send the closest car with a defib. And I said I remember this discussion, it was over a decade ago, when I was in firearms, as to whether or not we'd want our ARVs, our armed response vehicles at the time, attending sort of medical emergencies. And it was sort of, there's lots of discussion, lots of debate as to whether that would move them away from the core purpose. But actually, if the core purpose is to save life, which it is, and that's common throughout the three agencies, then once you get to that point, the thing seems self-evident that if you can help, you should. And I'm not saying that that's, I'm not putting in that sense. I'm not sort of saying the FBU is wrong, but what I'm saying is, as an agency, as a police service, if we can help, we should. If we can help save someone's life, we should. And I think that, I hope that would be sort of echoed across the board.
Dave?
Yeah, like I said, when the trial went on, it wasn't just code reds we were going to all kinds of stuff during that trial, which brought up loads of issues and near misses and stuff we put in at the time. I do understand what you're saying. Should the ambulance be funded properly? You know, these are the simple questions that I'd like to ask people that no one wants to really answer. But like I said, we're in national negotiations, and our current position is we will look at the work if pay is addressed, and we want training, and we want proper equipment. It's very simple what we're asking for.
So it's a standoff at the moment, in that the government won't give you a decent pay offer.
Yeah.
So to do more work.
It is exactly that, and it's also the work that it entails. There's no clear definition of the work that people want us to do. So it's basically, the last offer was basically an open-ended list of jobs that they want the fire service to do. In fact, if you put astronaut and brain surgeon on it, I'd stick it out in April, I'd probably laugh at it, because it was ridiculous, the list that was there. So until this stuff is addressed, we are where we are. So
perhaps I could ask our colleagues from Durham what happens in relation to co-responding in your neck of the woods.
We certainly, as I said earlier, were involved in the co-responding. Just to answer the point that Kevin made, we had a man collapse with a heart attack right outside Darlington station. Straight out, sorted it, and then massive publicity for the service when he came back with his family to say thank you. We did during the trial, 3,000 calls, direct called in, and we saved more lives out of that trial than we did in the earth from fire, etc. So we actually did that. But I have to respect the position of the FBU. They're in the middle of a vote, so we will look for it. I do have to say, and again, you don't have it in London, but we have retained duty stations, and the retained duty stations were up for it as well as the full-time.
The retained duty system stations continue
Sorry?
to do. The retained duty systems, we have 3 stations currently in the service. They continue voluntarily to carry out the corresponding role in line with the ambulance service. And just to clarify the point, we received funding, so it didn't cost the ambulance service anything in County Durham and Darlington to carry out the corresponding trial as part of the NJC trial, and we carried it out. It helped us also on some of the stations when the trial was ongoing on the whole-time stations. It actually doubled the number of operational shouts that the crews were turned out to. So it helped us to justify our response model in those station areas which were predominantly quiet, where the calls had reduced, through our prevention and protection work over the years, which we've been really successful at in helping reduce the number of fires that we respond to.
So on that, I would say that them stations are undermining the national negotiation at this moment in time, because they shouldn't be doing that work when we're clearly trying to establish how the work is defined. So
saving people's lives, so we don't see the problem.
It's done on a voluntary basis.
Well, the answer is to get the national dispute resolved
exactly
to mutual satisfaction all round.
We want to mutually work together, but when things like that happen, it undermines the whole national negotiation.
I think that's a question of priorities, isn't it, really, Chairman?
Yes, do you know, I think so. And I must say, whenever I've met firefighters, and I've been to every fire station in London, they are such good people. They're there, they want to help. They want to be doing these things. They want to be working alongside their colleagues. That's what they've always told me. So I'm sad to hear.
Susan,
with the firefighters I spoke to about co-responding.
Yeah, equally I didn't.
So
firefighters also want to put food
anyway,
on
the short answer is to resolve the dispute.
Pointless industrial dispute.
Sorry, firefighters also want to put food on the table, pay their gas bills and everything, but we've been living on austerity. We're 14% behind.
Anyway, the answer
we've now got people wanting us to do work for free.
Is helping anyone,
right,
Chairman.
no,
well,
shall we stop this? Can you carry on with your
I will do.
proper question?
That's what I was about to do.
Good.
We talked about the forced entry issue earlier on, and I think there's much more to ask about that, which was on my list. The other thing I wanted to talk about was mental health issues. And I think Kevin was sort of half hinting about this, and this is to do with data availability or whatever. I mean, if you are called to a fire and somebody is mentally disturbed inside and they've got a mental health issue, presumably in your interest to know on the way that you've got a potential problem. Same for the police, I suppose. But is that something that can happen?
I think we always need to be mindful that we can't account for the behaviour of people within any fire situation, and whether that person is living there or a guest or not. We do have processes in place for people that are particularly high risk, not necessarily through mental health, but that's very much done in collaboration and coordination with the Metropolitan Police. We work on what's called an underwrite system, so we make a note on our files to obviously for our fire crews to proceed with caution. Notwithstanding, we do have a duty to respond to that incident and make sure that the surrounding occupants and other occupants are safe and well. I think part of that key work, particularly when you talk about mental health, is in relation to the work that we do around dementia and how we recognise and train people with dementia. But it's also about the mental health of our firefighters as well. So one of the things that was mentioned earlier was about obviously the trauma of meeting members of the family. So we've recognised that there's been some significant events that have taken place, as well as co-responding, that we've looked at the mental health of our crews as well. And we work as a part of the Blue Light Collaboration and Mind in partnership with them to educate. We're also doing computer-based training packages, or developing computer-based training packages around mental health and well-being of our crews, and also around mental health and awareness training for our officers. So that are people that are demonstrating stress and anxiety. That will naturally transpose not only within the workforce, but obviously with their engagement with the members of the public as well in quite traumatic events. We do a lot of work with the elderly as well, particularly, as I said, around dementia. But as a norm, we won't necessarily be tagging people for mental health issues. It's those that are particularly high risk to crews. Crews are incredibly adaptable and very well trained and great at communicating with a whole broad range of the community. And they know that if they've got any particular issue with an individual, they have any particularly safeguarding concerns due to the extent of the mental health, they know the processes under safeguarding and what they can do to call on help and assistance to come and support them in that environment. So we're not sharing data at that granular level.
What I was going to ask you, Richard, are you sharing with the other emergency services the work you do on the mental health support you give to firefighters? I know from we went to the USAR training, there was some grievance from some of the police people there that they weren't getting the same support that the fire brigade had after Grenfell, for example.
Yes, my apologies for not understanding the question entirely. So,
well, it didn't matter because I was going to ask that anyway.
Okay. Yes, we do. Obviously, our trauma team are working with other services. I can't find the brief on which services they are. Thank you. Counselling and Trauma Services are involved in peer-based trauma network with the LFB. Volunteers are trained in trauma support of Blue Light Partners. In addition to that, we've got a London Blue Light Network steering group, which has representation from Blue Light Services and the mental health charity Mind. So we are sharing our knowledge and experience, and having sat at CG during the Grenfell, the conversation that was had very early on was what support could our Blue Light Partners give us whilst that incident was running, because we recognised the mental health challenges that would pose for our workforce very, very early on. And thanks, obviously, to the leadership of the Commissioner, we've taken that through and continue to do that for our workforce.
Well, and the question really was to what extent that learning has been passed on to the police in particular, because I think you heard the complaints as well. While
I heard the conversation, yes I did, yeah.
That the police officers involved in the recovery.
So, as I said, the network, we have that network working group. I'm not really at liberty to comment on how that then transposes through the Metropolitan Police. It wouldn't be appropriate to say.
I don't know if Matt wants to say anything.
So I think the overall occupational health offer and linked to that, the mental health offer within the police, is something that's developed significantly since 2017 for a variety of reasons, Grenfell being one of them. The issue of mental health and OH supports on our on the work plan for the Heads of People meeting. That is one of our collaboration strands. So that's something where we would look to, in the event of major incidents, look to gather the support and experience, and also some of the resource perhaps of our colleagues to support in the different incidents that we've had. I think in terms of mental health more widely, as the start of the question, it's well known the extent to which mental health places demand, particularly on the police, but also on the ambulance service, and that actually this is a medical matter, and the police are probably not the best people, nor likewise the LFB, the best people to be dealing with it. And what we're looking at through the police transformation funded work that we did around contact and response was an outline design as to what a mental health hub could look like that would support London, hosted most likely by the LAS, gathering specialists together to provide a service that could support both police and LFB in terms of responding to mental health, having that immediate access to clinical notes, having that immediate access to the information that would be required to enable risk assessments to take place, and also more from a policing perspective than perhaps LFB, getting the pathways into care, so we're not bouncing around a number of CCGs or bouncing around London waiting for availability of 136 suites, which is an issue which, from a policing perspective, is well rehearsed and well talked about.
Yeah, so a couple of points there. So the three HR directors of the three services, Claire Davis from the Met, Patricia Grealish from the LAS and Tim Powell from the LFB have a workshop planned for Tuesday, 2 weeks' time, if I believe. And the whole focus of that workshop is around the well-being of our collective three services staff. As been discussed, after a large, serious or major incident, I think we can rely upon each other to support each other in those times of extremis, and that's very much on the top of the to-do list for the 3 HR directors, is to get a cohesive, collaborative wellbeing strategy for all 3 services staff, and ensure we look after the importance of looking after our staff.
Okay, thank you. Leonie.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to talk a bit about major, serious or catastrophic incidents or events, and obviously sadly we had quite a number of examples during 2017, and I just wondered if I could get you to comment on what progress has been made in recent years to ensure that London's emergency services are working as effectively as possible together during those kind of incidents. And I think I'll start with the police. If I start with you, Matthew.
Thank you. I think there's a number of different types of incidents, and we've encountered several of them. We had a exceptionally busy and difficult time during 2017 for a variety of reasons. If we look at the terrorist attacks that we've had, I can start on that, and maybe others chip in with other incidents. A significant amount of effort across all 3 services was done in terms of our prepare work for responding to such attacks, and attacks of different descriptions, and that's ranged from the boards that we sit on at that level, focusing specifically on our preparedness, to some of the tactics that we've used, to the actual physical exercising that we've done across all 3 of these services, and we continue to do so, and do so regularly. Some of the stuff is not what I would want to discuss in a public forum for the obvious reasons, but I would say
We've had some private briefings as well, so we appreciate that you won't be able to go into all of the details.
And in that area, I would say our preparedness and is country, if not world leading, in terms of how we work together to deal with some of the most difficult terrorist type attacks. And clearly also we've had other major and significant incidents during this time. London has suffered a number of things, and we continue to work together to prepare for that sort of thing, whether it's through exercising or through our joint working. I don't know if others want to comment on.
Well, I thought if after you, perhaps Richard might wish to come in and make a comment on that as well.
So, as well as obviously the preparing and exercising, as you would expect, with any large-scale major incident, there is a review after the event to look at what works well, areas we need to focus on going forward. That information is not only shared between organisations and between our partners, but we also utilise that information to share it at a national level. So joint operational learning database that can be used, or national operational guidance for the fire service, how that then feeds in some of our practices. There are examples where the recent events that have occurred are going through that. It wouldn't be appropriate to discuss them here now, because obviously it has to go through that scrutiny of that joint operational learning. That is all going through those systems with the primary aim of not only improving what we do in the London Fire Brigade and the London Blue Light Service, but how we then influence national and, if necessary, international learning around how we responded. So, nationally, people are looking at what London do, particularly with some of the traumatic events that have taken place, but also internationally as well. So there are clear systems in place. The Central Programme Office and National Operational Guidance sits within London and is headed by Susan. And that is all about working as a collaborative piece to the betterment of all services.
Can I just see if Kevin wants to add anything to that from the ambulance perspective? I think that's given us quite an interesting view there from the police and the brigade.
Yeah, I obviously concur with my 2 colleagues, and the advent of Jessup, that it's now well embedded across all 3 services, has served to ensure that collaboration works well on the operational arena. Jessup continues to be rolled out, refined and improved, and as learning from incidents happens, we will obviously adopt and continue to improve our operational response.
I'm going to ask you something about Grenfell and whether there's been some learning from this. I'm hoping that this is something that you will feel able to answer, but it has been brought to our attention that there was some evidence of different control rooms responding on the night from the police and ambulance to people in the tower, rather than just going through to the fire brigade. Is there any learning that we can take from that, and is that something that the brigade will be leading on?
I don't have any of those details to hand. What I will need to do is I will need to go away to find out the specifics and seek some advice whether it's appropriate to release that information currently, because obviously we wouldn't want to prejudice any inquiry taking place. The broader question you asked around operational learning, with every incident that we attend, we learn. We have processes in place internally through through our performance review of operations and performance review of command. There is a lot of work, particularly in my current role, that we are doing based on that learning, and a tangible example of that specifically is around working in smoke-filled environments and fire escape hoods that has demonstrated a benefit to the community, and we are sharing that learning with National Fire Services. So the very short answer is, of course, we will take away and learn from what we know now, and obviously what may come out of the interim guidance and recommendations from phase 1. And we are very mindful of what phase 2 of the inquiry and the process that takes place, and what those subsequent recommendations may have on not only the London Fire Brigade but also the National Fire Service. And we need to recognise specifically in relation to collaboration what are the benefits and the challenges that some of those recommendations may have for us as a collective around collaboration going forward. I think we recognise there is work to be done, and whilst we will continue to work that way, we remain open-minded to whatever the inquiry will give.
Similar kind of question really for you, Matthew, as well, also from Grenfell. It's my understanding that the police declared a major incident and the LFB weren't immediately aware that that was the case. Is there some learning that can be taken from that as well to stop that from happening in similar circumstances, should they ever arise in the future?
So I'm not able to comment specifically on Grenfell, which is subject to inquiry, so I won't do that. However, what I will say, and like my colleague from the LFB, is I've never dealt with any incident where there hasn't been some learning, and that is indicative of the jobs that we do. There is always going to be learning out of everything we do, and a culture of debrief and learning is one that we're very keen and work hard to embed. If there is learning to be taken out of the specific incident that comes through the recommendations of the properly appointed body, then absolutely we would look at that and look at how we could either assist, lead, develop, change to in whatever context we would find ourselves in. But in terms of that specific incident, I don't have the information, and I don't think I feel comfortable commenting now, only because it's subject to all of the review that's ongoing.
I mean, it's also obvious with the Grenfell incident, and I think a lot of other incidents, that you're not just needing to collaborate with each other in the blue light services, you need to collaborate with the local authority in the area where you are. And obviously in the case of Grenfell, there was also the Kensington and Chelsea TMO. Now, I've watched some of the inquiry evidence, and it seems that there was several quite long periods of time where there wasn't sufficient contact going on between the LALO, the local authority liaison officer, and others over, the plans of the building, who was in each flat, and so on and so forth. And I just wondered whether a review of that collaboration with other public bodies was also taking place. I'm going to ask you that, Richard.
Please.
Again, it wouldn't be appropriate for me to comment, because obviously it's an ongoing investigation and public inquiry. The thing around collaboration, we have the London Resilience Forums,
sorry, can I just say, it does seem like a really obvious and necessary thing to do.
Yeah.
I represent a borough where we have 99 blocks, and that's just one of the 2 boroughs I represent, 99 blocks that are over 10 stories. Now, if I go and talk to the borough commanders, I know that they do have routes on and off of estates where many blocks can be found. So I would hope that building up those relationships across London in all of the boroughs is something that has perhaps started to be looked at sooner rather than waiting until the end of the Grenfell inquiry. If I can just put that out there. And
Yeah.
David was talking about safety earlier on. This isn't just for safety of members of the public, it's also safety for, you know, getting machinery and also people from the
Yep.
brigade on and off estates as quickly as possible.
So, not answering specific Grenfell question.
No, broaden it
So
out, please.
broadening it out, absolutely. Previous scrutiny committee talked about regulatory fire safety and the work they're doing, and the fact that we've had crews going out and looking at various estates, various high-rise blocks. We are not going to sit and wait for the outcomes of the inquiry, because we absolutely recognise that there's work to be done in the meantime. Now, I know of borough commanders I've spoken to that are having those conversations with local authorities. So that work...
And jointly with the police and the ambulance service
absolutely.
as well, 'cause it has to be done jointly.
Yeah, absolutely. The relationship at borough commander level is very, very strong. It does depend on the relationships within individual boroughs, but I am confident that borough commanders are linking in with their borough commander police colleagues and local authorities.
Matthew, you wanted to come in
Yeah,
as well.
so on that, I mean, some of the work that we've done through the Transformation Fund, the outline case and high-level design around London concept of a London Emergency Services Coordination Centre. So what that recognised at strategic outline case was there are a lot of incidents every day, fortunately nowhere near on the scale of we've seen in 2017, where there is a multi-agency response required. And what we did see through generic learning, not through specific incidents, that there was a delay at times in terms of different agencies having the same information, because different things come into different control rooms at different times, and that's again not related to one incident, but is something that we've seen. And so the recommendation that came out of the strategic outline case was for a joint London Emergency Services Coordination Centre, where leaders from each of the services would be co-located to provide very swift transfer of information on the incidents where we respond daily, as well as then the major critical significant incidents, that some of which the likes we've alluded to already. So that work has got to a high level design stage, and the next step is that there is a funding application for further money into the Police Transformation Fund. Decisions on that are expected shortly to take the work to the next stage, which would be to an outline business case and a detailed design. And that is linked to the work I've touched on already around the mental health hub, optimising cross-service information transfer, MATE hub and that sort of thing. So there's 5 key strands to this, and we've sought further funding to develop that work. If that funding isn't forthcoming, then we'll have to look to it within ourselves as to what we think is really important and what we can fund within existing resources. And that process hasn't yet started. But I think all of the things we identified that were agreed at a strategic level across all 3 services are things that we think would be of use to London, of use to the public, and actually benefit the services collectively.
That's good to hear that thought is going in, and let's hope that goes ahead. I just want to ask a point in relation to the changes to the BCU structure, because Richard was making a very good point. I'm certainly aware that my borough commanders have excellent relationships locally, but obviously there's been no change in the fire service borough commanders, whereas of course in the police there's been quite a substantial change. Has that impacted on progress in those areas that you were just outlining, or there's no chance of it being sidelined in some way whilst the BCU commanders are forging ahead with those changes?
No, I don't think so. I think the role of the BCU commanders is now getting more and more well established. The first sort of pathfinder sites were many months ago now, and we've now gone live across all 12 BCUs. And the building of local relationships is going to be critically important to that. And so I think at the moment my instinct is that no, that won't change across our sort of desire to collaborate at a local level as well as at a sort of pan-London level, which is the sort of things that we're looking at through this high-level design.
And what about relationships with, talking about the public services and working with local authorities? Obviously in some boroughs, for example, all of the housing stock has been outsourced to either to an ALMO or a TMO, or in many cases they've transferred the stock to some sort of registered social landlord, some of which are now very large and operate across many London boroughs. Have you made special efforts to build up working relationships with them, again to make sure that you've got full information from them on routes onto estates, location of dry rises, whatever the information is that's needed? Richard?
So part of the duty of firefighter borough commanders are to go and do familiarisation visits of premises that are deemed of particular interest around operational activity. Part of that will be looking at access. Part of that will be looking at where the dry risers are, and some of them will have premises information box, so they'll be checking the plans, getting an understanding of the building. In relation to the building itself, obviously when they are doing an inspection of the building, they'll be looking at what are the concerns within that building. Are there any particular issues around fire doors, for example? And then they would be feeding that back to the station manager and to the borough commander to then identify who the occupier or the owner of the building are. And that's when we start to have those wider conversations. There has been work done with some of the major building providers. It's not always easy to identify who owns particular buildings, which proves a challenge in itself. But that's why we get the firefighters to go and look at buildings of particular interest, to start familiarising themselves and talking about the firefighting tactics they may need to use should they get an event. One of the focuses will be very much around whatever that premises is, whether it's a high-rise or not, is about the occupant themselves. So how do we make the occupant as safe as possible with advice, with the fitting of smoke alarms, for example, giving them home fire safety visits. So it's a broad suite of how we start to identify not only the people within the building, but it's also about how they're going to tackle that building. Can I honestly put my hand on my heart and say that we will always be able to identify a building and the owner of that building? No, I can't. But what I can say is that borough commanders are very, very proactive in working with the local authority, working with the local community to look at how best to respond to that building. And if there are issues, if there is a managing agent, how do we best link into that managing agent?
Thank you. I just want to ask a little bit about collaboration on preparation. Obviously, one of the things that I hope we don't need to prepare for, but it is possible that it could happen, things like a widespread drought or widespread flooding or things like that relating to climate change, if you like, but those kind of chronic risks. Is that something that is being worked on jointly as well?
Can I come back? Specifically in relation to flooding, there's a project currently running. It's part of our LSP commitment, and within that it talks about our response and provision to Londoners around flood assets, and that's working in collaboration with the Environment Agency. Also, the capability that's being designed and developed and is being offered up is around our swift water capability as a national asset, but also an asset on the Thames. So we work with the RLNI very closely on that as a emergency responder. And we also have national assets that we contain within London, so the high volume pumps around flooding. So there's a considerable amount of work that we've always done and we are developing further as part of our London Safety Plan commitment. When we talk about drought...
Is that just individually as the fire service, or is that in conjunction with the police and also ambulance?
So it's more so around the flooding element, it's more so around the Environment Agency and working with the Heart to have a swift water capability, less so with the Metropolitan Police in relation to their capability and what we'd be asking them to do. So it's more about containment, removal and rescue that we'd focus on, hence us drawing on some of the capabilities of Heart. But of course, in an incident, a flooding incident, we would naturally work with the police around whatever zone or area that may be, around an evacuation plan, and we've demonstrated that very clearly in the Kenley Waterworks flooding, where we operated very effectively as a team.
And drought?
Droughts, yeah. So in relation to droughts,
Everyone
last year
picks up their glass of water immediately.
So last year was particularly challenging around the drought. We provided a response nationally to support the drought nationally as well. We recognise it is a growing challenge to us within the London Fire Brigade in particular. We are working more with local authorities around their open spaces, around cutting the grass, shorter fire breaks. All those conversations are having much more at a local level. In relation to London Ambulance and police response, less so. So when you talk about collaboration, yes. If you're talking about blue light collaboration, not as extensive.
Any preparations in collaboration for Brexit, which may or may not happen? Who knows what's happening on that front? Is that something that you're preparing for in case there's some sort of unrest, either because it goes ahead or because it doesn't go ahead, I guess?
I think I can speak confidently. All three agencies have invested time and energy should Brexit arise. One area specifically as an example is around fuel. So should there be fuel disruption, all three agencies have worked together to work up and further consolidate our already well-established plans around fuel disruption that we had in place following the last fuel strikes some time ago. So.
And finally, HMIC has done an assessment of the JESIP that interoperability has yet to be fully embedded across the services. Would you agree with that? And if you did agree with it, how much do you think it can be improved, and what would it look like if it was completely successfully implemented? And I might just ask Susan to answer on that one. Well, either of you, really.
Did you want to?
I feel like I've been picking on Richard. I feel like I should pick on you instead.
I think JESIP has been in operation, extensively across London, and colleagues have mentioned already how we continue to train under the JESIP principles to ensure our readiness for a multi-agency attack. There are always difficulties and challenges in terms of availability of time, capacity for that kind of training. But despite all that, that training does go ahead and it proves very useful. I'm not entirely sure that we would agree with the inspectorate, but let's see. They're coming to us in July. Let's see if they reach the same conclusion in London. I hope they don't.
I think that's why I passed it, because I see HMRC's all well. So a really clear example of London's commitment is exercise EUR that took place, multi-agency, multinational exercise. As my colleagues have said, we already regularly exercise through a whole host of risks and threats that may be posed. And on the incident ground, we demonstrate that, and some of the reviews should hopefully, over time, demonstrate how effective our response has been to various incidents that took place last year.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so final question. Basically, looking to the future, what are the next steps to increase collaboration, and is there anything that the Mayor could do to be helpful towards increasing collaboration? Anybody? Shall I start with you, Kevin?
So collaboration is not going to go away. In terms of increasing collaboration, I think it's a slow burn. I think it's wherever you shine the light in any of the three organisations.
From the ambulance service, I don't think they use slow burn in the fire brigade as an analogy.
I think it's, as I say, it's not going to go away. We will continue to collaborate, and where we can seek out efficiency and effectiveness, we will do.
Okay. Matthew?
So for me, I think it's about all of us maintaining the view on the best outcomes for the public. I think that's where we will achieve. If we focus on that, then the collaboration seems easier sometimes. And I think going back to the point around the HMIC FRS, I hope I have a high degree of confidence that in terms of our interoperability in London, as I said earlier, I feel that some of the things that we do, some of the capabilities that we have, some of the things that we have done make us not only UK leading but world leading in some areas. I think in the short to medium term for us, it's looking at the outcome of the work that we did through the Police Transformation Fund, through looking at whether we can develop the Emergency Services Coordination Centre, the Pan-London Mental Health Hub, optimising cross-service referrals, and the other work that we haven't spoken about today, but which is important, around frequent callers to enable us to reduce demand, particularly across LAS and LFB, and then finally estates, which were the sort of 5 areas of work that we identified in the high-level design that we would be eager to take forward. So the funding for that work is at the moment in the balance, and there are huge demands this year on the Police Transformation Fund. So whether we are successful in our bid to take that to the next step is as yet unknown. But what I do know is there's an awful lot of demand on a small pot of money. So if we don't get that, then it will be for the 3 services to come together to see which elements, whether there is money elsewhere that could be put towards different strands of this, or whichever elements we would want to progress through a business as usual route. That's where I see our sort of focus in the next sort of 3 to 6 months.
Thank you. David, I know your views. Do you have anything to add?
No, obviously just we've got the national negotiation going on at the moment. I'm limited in what I can say.
Susan.
I think one of the things that we'll be looking at, obviously, all the areas of the strategic intent as outlined by the 3 chiefs, and seeing what we can take forward under each of those headings. But in particular, I think thinking about strategic alignment across the 3 organisations. We have our separate strategic objectives, we have our separate core responsibilities, but understanding what we have in common and identifying the opportunities to deliver better services for London within that, I think is going to be the primary objective.
I tend to agree with Susan around the strategic alignment. I think what's key is where's the overlaps, where can we do the maximum benefit for Londoners, and look at what are the key priorities going forward. There's a lot of work, very good work taking place, but it does come back to what are the key ones that we can all maximise our benefits from. We need to be mindful around the inspectorate that's just been mentioned, about what are the recommendations coming out of the inspectorate. Tranche 1 has obviously been published, and Tranche 2 is going to be published in the next couple of months. We are part of Tranche 3, so we need to take into consideration what that may look like around collaboration, not only for London but from a national perspective. And then obviously the transformational fund, the police have made mention to. Some of the things that we may want to do will be very much subject to what will be funded and what won't be funded, and what's the benefits that we'll have. And then, how does that not only support us, but also increase our resilience as 3 blue light services going forward? And I think that does come absolutely back to the statement made around what's that wider strategic objective that we all work to.
John and Sarah, I'm mindful I'm asking about London because clearly we're here. Do you have anything that you'd like to?
I would like to see the Mayor come out and show support for it, say that he's supporting it. I totally agree with Richard about the Transformation Fund. That is the way we're going for capital. I think as the Blue Light Services, we need to work more together to put together bids for that to get more success. I think we need to monitor what we're doing. I think we need to monitor the successes, monitor the failures. And I think we should be publicising to the public that we are working together, that we are one Blue Light Service working together. And I think we need to start to involve the staff, the unions and the public more in what we are doing, because I think it is a positive approach and I think we need to sell it.
Couldn't agree more, Sarah.
Yeah, going back to my initial points really, is just it needs strategic buy-in and to be driven by the top with that strategic direction. You have to have a willing partner to start off. The collaboration discussions initially takes a lot of time and resource to develop collaboration, come up with collaboration opportunities, then implement them. But as I go back to our strategy that we have in place, just make sure that you have things that's tangible. So will it produce quantifiable efficiencies, improve services to the community, and also reduce our demand on our services that we have, because as I said, in these austere times we are cutting back. And to concur with John's point, capital funding is no longer in place, so we do rely on transformation funding or generating efficiency savings and opportunities through collaboration to help us fund our organisations and be more efficient going forward.
Lovely, thank you. Well, can I say a really big thank you to all of you for all of your contributions. Can I particularly single out you two for coming all the way down from Durham. We're very grateful. It's so good for all of us, isn't it, to hear just how very well this works for you and your positivity around it. So thank you all for that. We've just got a few more formal items on the agenda we need to discuss. If you're welcome to stay, will only be a second. Can I ask the committee to note the report and the subsequent discussion and agree to delegate authority to me as chairman in consultation with party group lead members to agree any output from the meeting? Thank you. Can we note the summary of work completed during 2018-19 Assembly year and the provisional schedule of meetings for the 2019-20 Assembly year, which is subject to agreement at the annual general meeting of the London Assembly on 2nd May.
Noted.
Thank you. Can we also agree in relation to urgent matters only a general delegation of authority in respect to the committee's powers and functions, apart from those defined as special scrutiny functions, as outlined in the GLA Act 1999 and GLA Standing Order 10.1 G to the chairman of the committee in consultation with the party group lead members of the committee from the close of this meeting until the next meeting of the committee, provisionally on the 23rd of May 2019, subject to agreement at the AGM.
Good.
Thank you very much. 2nd of May 2019. The date of the next meeting is subject to confirmation of the London Assembly's calendar of meetings at the annual meeting of the London Assembly on 2nd of May 2019. The next meeting of the Fire Resilience and Emergency Planning Committee is scheduled for the 23rd of May 2019 at 2 p.m. in the Chamber City Hall. There's no other urgent business, so I declare the meeting finished. Thank you.
GLA Chamber